Hi everyone, I'm Sophie and I'm going to be evaluating a recent practical physical education lesson that I delivered. When planning my session, I used a traditional lesson structure instead of the TGFU structure, as my learning outcomes were focusing on team building and communication skills rather than a game-based sport. Although the session could have been used by teams to build these skills if needed, in my lesson I did a warm-up of a game of Bulldog and then moved on to the main session, which had 3 different team building games where the group was split into 2 teams, and the first game was with everyone holding hands. They had to get the hoop around the group by stepping through it without letting go of hands. The fastest team won. The second game was the raft game, where they had to get from one side to the other without touching the floor outside of the hoops. The fastest one won again. The third one was relays, where one player from each team would run to the end of the line, pull the hoop over their body and back onto the floor, run back, tag the next player, and obviously the fastest one won that one too. The positives in my lesson was that the session flowed well due to the confidence in what I was teaching and knowledge. I provided support and encouragement which led to motivation, which is needed and important in order to help the children stay interested and engaged in the lesson. My lesson was generally well planned and structured, and was delivered with confidence, which was enjoyable for the participants, considering it was a last-minute change due to equipment availability and partner being ill. On the other hand, the negatives of my lesson would have been some of my communication skills, as there was a mix-up in one of the games where one of the teams ended up cheating because they could see through my rules. Also, I would have provided more feedback to help the students get better ideas or become faster or beat the opposition. The one point within my session that I would like to focus on is communication and the way that it's used and how it should be used within physical education. I believe that my communication skills were successful within the session, but I also believe that they definitely could be improved in the future. Effective communication is a necessary ingredient for encouraging students to engage in physical activity. Communication is the way we send and receive information to and from other people through verbal using words or non-verbal such as body language, signs and pictures. I mainly use verbal communication, as Burton and Radicki says that it is important for teachers and coaches to be able to clearly communicate what their expectations of the students are and what the standards are in order to get a greater response such as effort and positiveness back from them. Within their communication, they need to be able to instruct, encourage, discipline, organise and provide feedback also to the athletes or students by sending clear messages between them, but also listening to the students too, as this is important to make the student feel more comfortable, interested and engaged in the lesson, as they know that the teacher is going to be listening to them on how they feel, etc. Due to my PE lesson being taught to my peers on my course, I feel like the way that I performed and delivered the lesson would be very different to the way that I would have if I was teaching young children or in a secondary school. This is because I knew that they knew what I was talking about or describing when teaching, as we are sports students and had the same knowledge, whereas with younger children I would have had to communicate stronger with them, with demonstrations and verbal help once the games had started. This also would have been affected by the tone of my voice and the use of words that I would have chosen to use when describing each element of the lesson, as Johnson states that up to 93% of the meaning of the message is conveyed through tone of voice and non-verbal behaviours. As a teacher, it would be very important to be aware of the tone of my voice, as it could almost change the meaning of the message I'm trying to put across to the students, as I may need to shout to be able to reach every single person in the class so that they can hear me. However, the tone of my voice needed to be calming and happy, so the students would feel more comfortable and willing to engage in the activity instead of feeling like I was angry with them. Another huge essential within communication and physical education is feedback from the teacher to the student. This is proved by Small and Smith, who observed and evaluated coaches or teachers' impact on their athletes or students, and found that the students and athletes responded positively to the coaches, who provided positive feedback after their performance, but they responded unfavourably to the coaches when the coaches didn't notice them or notice their efforts or mistakes with no feedback. The learning outcomes for my lesson were to increase communication and teamwork skills. Therefore, a team building structured lesson was ideal to help this, as team building can help increase the effective level of communication within groups, as they learn that they need to work together to solve the problems, such as to plan how they get the raft to the other side the quickest, or the quickest way to step through the hoop when holding hands. For example, what body part goes through the hoop first, and they would do this by communicating with each other effectively. Through having effective communication within the teams, this can build up trust and loyalty and give message clarity to one another. The ability to have effective communication can influence the way others perceive them and how they decide to communicate with them through different tones of voices, slightly different languages, or even non-verbal ways, as Samantha Gluck says. If I was to redo this session again, I would definitely try to improve the level of communication too. Even though the focus was for the participants to achieve, one of the activities did not go to plan, as the way I communicated it was not in the best way that I could have, as I did not take into account the age or the knowledge of the students I was teaching. Therefore, this caused one of the teams to cheat in the raft game, as they were smart enough to pick through my instructions. Therefore, I would use a more effective instruction where I explain each step of the rules at the time, such as you were not allowed to move with the hoop, you were not allowed to touch the floor unless in the hoop, which must also be on the floor too, etc. However, I would need to rethink if I was teaching students that were younger, as this could confuse them with too many rules, so I would have to keep the game simple to keep them engaged. Also, in the future, I would make sure that my lesson plan had a backup idea in case of any last minute problems or changes, as this happened to me just before delivering my lesson, as equipment I had planned was unavailable and my partner was unwell. Therefore, had to replan and adapt my lesson as quickly as I could in order for it to be a success. As Joan says, lesson planning is important to know the aims and objectives of what I am going to be teaching to the students and what the outcome of the end of the lesson is supposed to be. Also essential to help the teacher maintain a standard teaching pattern, keeps the lesson from not achieving what needs to be done, and gives the lesson some structure instead of spontaneous ideas that may tell the students that you are unaware of what you are doing. Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Sophie and I'm going to be evaluating a recent practical physical education lesson that I delivered. When planning my session, I used a traditional lesson structure instead of the TGFU structure, as my learning outcomes were focusing on team building and communication skills rather than a game-based